Hello, everyone. I hope that you are having a good start to the week. I just wanted to touch base. Maslow and I wanted to touch base. I've been gone for a conference this weekend, so not only are my students emailing me a lot of questions, but my cat is being super needy. I wanted to touch base and give you some feedback on our last case study, Adam and the turkey. Um, so let's just kind of think back, and I wanted to recap some of the things that you discussed in terms of how you would approach this conversation with Adam's teacher as well as his parents. So, this is a really, first of all, this is a real world thing. Adam was an actual child. That is actually his drawing. Of course, we've used a pseudonym for privacy purposes, but I want you to know that he's real and that a child in that age group actually produced that drawing. So, a definite, very real world case study. And unfortunately, one of those examples when gifted students are not always the most respectful. So we see that a lot. Um, and Adam trying to kind of speak up to his teacher and say, well, do you want this done quickly or do you want it done, quote, good? So we'll talk about that. I wanted to highlight a few things that I found really insightful in your notes or your discussions rather this week. I really like Ashley's comment that gifted doesn't always mean fast. That's definitely a good point, something that we assume that giftedness means that we're just quickly going through everything, when oftentimes it can mean the opposite. So it can mean that we take longer because we are so dedicated to getting every single detail. Um, One of the suggestions I would have for practical basis for Adam is to give him more of a long-term project. So a lot of times when we work with children, especially at this younger age, they're doing a lot of different projects. A good strategy to differentiate for Adam would be thinking about a project that would combine a lot of short-term projects into one long-term project. That encourages what we call depth and complexity in the gifted education world. So not only are we differentiating for content, process, and product, which you'll hear about soon in other courses, but also we're going into greater depth and into greater complexity. So giving a long-term assignment that kind of combines lots of short-term assignments would be a good strategy for Adam. I appreciated how Rebecca said she would start this conversation by simply, Maslow. Okay, the assistant has left. I really liked how Rebecca said she would start this conversation by defining giftedness. So that's super important. We are acting as the gifted specialists in our school environments or our work environments. And it's important that we don't assume that whoever we're talking to understands what giftedness is. So, starting out by quoting a good definition of giftedness and even segueing into listing some of these common characteristics of giftedness is definitely a good strategy that I appreciated hearing. So let's talk about Adam for a minute. I've heard a little bit of debate amongst you all. Is he this high achiever? Is he the bright child? Or is he a gifted child? One really good trick to think about in terms of gifted children is that they do things that are developmentally not normal. So a high achiever is just that. They're a very high achiever, but they don't exhibit anything that's developmentally surprising. So if you think about Adam, that turkey drawing that he produced is extremely developmentally unique. So if you were like a turkey drawing from a typical first grader, you would not see the type of drawing that you saw from him. So that, in my mind, is a really good indicator that there's something more than just high ability going on here. There's definitely something developmentally different. He's got those fine motor skills, which several of you pointed out. He's got that connection between here's the crayon box and I'm going to make that connection and try to use that same shadowing technique on the feathers. So in my mind, he would definitely kind of put up that red flag for me to keep an eye on him in terms of giftedness, particularly because his actions were so developmentally unique. So that's a good kind of way to gauge, hey, is this a high ability, high achiever individual, or is this gifted? Remember, a gifted child, their whole brain works differently. They see the world differently. They process things differently, and they're developmentally at a very different stage intellectually, often, and even fine motor, than their age-like peers. So that's a good way to gauge the difference between those. I also liked how a lot of you drew the connection between perfectionism and giftedness. Sometimes we actually say that procrastination is a good mask for perfectionism. So we're seeing a very high task commitment. If we think back to Renzulli, he is very determined to do this turkey as well as he can. So we're seeing high task commitment, but that could also be um, a factor related to perfectionism as well. So he is so determined to do everything perfectly, it can actually produce a little bit of stress for him. One other note to really consider in terms of completing your work on time. So a lot of times, gifted children they're kind of on one of the two extremes. Either they're done too fast or they're taking too long. And if it's on the extreme where they're taking too long, that doesn't mean they're necessarily struggling to do the work. What it means is they're almost doing an entirely different assignment than their peers. So think about Adam, all right? He's creating this masterpiece of a turkey. He is creating more than 5 feathers. By the way, apparently that's what he was trying to do. When they interviewed him, the different colors were representing how he wanted more than 5 feathers. He's creating all of the anatomically correct components of the turkey. So he's doing like an entirely different assignment than the other students who are basically just coloring in hand to make it kind of look like a turkey. So it's kind of like saying, I want one person to write me a 5-page paper and one person to write me a 1-page paper. And then complaining to the 5-page paper individual and saying, well, why aren't you done yet? These people over here, they've already written their 1 page. So oftentimes it really turns into comparing apples to oranges. So just do keep that in mind as we think about these strategies in terms of recognizing these gifted children. Sometimes they manifest in very unexpected manners. And as we progress in the semester, especially when we get to what I call the invisible gifted, we'll talk about a lot of underrepresented groups in gifted education and how a lot of times their giftedness manifests in a very different way. So, for example, I want to give you a teaser just to get you thinking about this. One of the characteristics we saw today, or this past week rather, is an intense memory, right? So a common example of that is a child who memorizes all the states and their capitals really quickly. And they know everything about geography and where all the rivers are and all of the lakes. Very impressive memory, okay? I want you to then think about a child who memorizes an absurd amount of rap lyrics, okay? They know every single word to every single rap song. Are you going to think about the child who knows the rap songs the same as you're going to think about the child who knows all of the information about geography? It's the same skill, it's the same really intense memory, but the way it's manifesting very much differs from child to child. So a lot of times we miss indicators of giftedness. So when we think of, oh, you know all the lyrics to a rap song, multiple rap songs, that doesn't sound very impressive. If you tell me you know all the 50 states, I'm impressed. So that's just a teaser of how we can start to recognize giftedness when it wouldn't be as expected as we would think. So there's some general feedback from Adam, and I think I've graded all of the discussion boards, so just make sure you go in and look for any feedback. Please ask me questions. I try not to comment too much on discussion boards because I want you guys to be communicating with each other. But I always post a pretty substantial amount of feedback to each of you. And then after the fact, I like to go in and give some feedback on the actual posts themselves. So we are wrapping up characteristics, and I'm looking forward to looking over your case studies next. It's always really impacting and powerful to start putting faces to this quote concept of giftedness. So now that we have started to cover what these gifted children look like and act like, and how we can start to consider maybe identifying them, this week we are progressing into probably one of the more debated topics. And that is simply whether or not gifted education is necessary. So, is it a right or is it a privilege? And I'm sure that many of you, especially working in the field currently, notice a lot of discrepancies in the field of education. There are certain individuals that may have more opportunity than others. And is gifted education something that students are privileged to, or is it something that they are mandated to by law? So it's kind of a philosophical topic. This week we will dig into some of the debate on right or privilege, and there's a lot of different opinions on this, and the case study will kind of help you see that from one individual's perspective. And then next week, our assignment is actually not posted yet. I'm doing a little bit of work on it, so I'll post it later this week. And we are doing a debate on whether or not giftedness is a right or a privilege. So I'll be back in touch later this week on some directions for that next week. But for this week, I want you to focus on really digging into those library materials and digging into the case study and starting to really ask yourself, maybe at the beginning of the semester, you would think gifted education is a privilege. Maybe now you're thinking it's a right, or maybe the opposite. I'm really interested to see what you guys think about this. So I hope you had a wonderful weekend. I hope you were all safe and healthy from the flu. And as always, please know that I am an email away or a phone call, and I'm happy to schedule any office hours to meet with any of you. All right, have a great night.